today's broadcast time, we will have our evening vapors. Maybe that's Vespers, I'm not. It just strikes me that the topic of tonight's inspirational message should be from that news item previously read that said, the boogie ain't the boogie if it ain't the mindless boogie. Now on to the analyzation of the news, now that we have been inspired. Before we get to all, in case we do, there were several tonight that mentioned the word chaos. Best I could make out, assuming it had nothing to do with Maxwell Smart. I think it was making more of specific reference to that which seems to be now part of the scientific vernacular, the laws and theories of chaos and etc. And of course the word has been around for a while. Chaos being, although I didn't look it up, but things running in a unpredictable manner, that they do not seem to be whatever it seems to be. The activity does not seem to be, or does not seem to ordinarily lend itself to a stable scheduling, any sort of reliable predictability. And I guess I should look the mother up. But that's mainly what chaos is. Now, I am vaguely aware, I'm sure that our splendid studio and learned audience, most of you look either studioed or learned, so that it has a more specific meaning now, except it was still taken from the idea that of the original word chaos, the original concept, but now it's run into the ideas that in some way that once you understand chaos, you can, in fact, do a bit better with predictability in scientific areas, such as the weather, rather than absolutely stating that the weather will do so-and-so, that there are too many variables to make an absolute prediction. That if you take into consideration that there are, let's say, alternative scenarios possible in the next 24 hours, and none of them are predictable. You could program them, you could run them through a manually made chart or a computer program, but none of the alternatives would be predictable. That is, if you're right up-to-date meteorologist. So in that sense, there is an amount of chaos, but then they point out that if you take all of those alternatives, options, possibilities, alternatives into learned consideration, that in fact you may be able to come up with a better, a more reliable predictions about such things as the weather. We need not go any further in case I've gone too far already, but that's generally, I think, what they have in mind. Now, I simply wanted to point out, man has always known that chaos, from the intellectual view, now you got to remember that, it's only man that has any concept of chaos, that it's man has always recognized that chaos was the prevailing mother of us all. And long before we had science, much less modern physics with their theories of chaos, that is what, for instance, religion has always been about. That it's the attempt for man to, in the midst of the mind realizing, may I be crude with you? Can we just be crude and just right to the point? Man's mind, long, long ago, immediately understood, if I may, since you didn't object, if I may just be direct about it. Man realized mentally that he had no idea whatsoever what was going on. His stomach does, his heart does, his bowels do, his naughty parts do, but his mind does not. That's why it is the mind. If you notice, I don't think they brought it, but there was a news item tonight that said a zebra turned to a rat and said, do you realize that man is the only creature that can seem to appear, or can seem to be more intelligent by appearing to be more stupid? Which is pretty complex. unless you realize what it means, and it's just self-evident. And a passing anthropologist, I guess we could say, representing a human, since most of the anthropologists I've ever heard of were, in fact, Homo sapiens. You could, in fact, consider him archetypically a scientist, a hard science thinker. He turned to the creatures and said, "Ha, what in the hell do you think brains, that is thinking brains, not the kind of brains that zebras and rats have. They have brains, but the brains do not lead to talk, to speech, to think, to thought, as we call it." So he says, you guys are just jealous. What do you think the point of the brain is? Now back to, you remember their comment, the zebra's comment to the rat? He says that man's the only creature. If you want to try now and take it down to a zebra level, a chimpanzee level, a wildebeest, that man is the only creature that can apparently, or seem to be, more intelligent by appearing to be stupider. Now if you take it below the intellectual level, and we did say a zebra, as a matter of fact, was going to try and pass himself off as being more intelligent by appearing to be dumber. Do I have to back up? You do know, because all of you have done it. That's part of being ordinary and alive, is you appear to be stupider, and it makes you appear to be more intelligent among civilized, sophisticated people. And if you know how to do it, and it takes, I mean, it's real complicated to do it. It takes same kind of brains it takes to run the world. That is, you know, to get in the morning, as we already established. But if we went below the intellectual level, if we went below the level of a cerebral cortex and a zebra, if they could do this, if for some reason he realized, did you realize that the zebra got to thinking humans, and they got better cars than us, live in better houses, they got a better grab on the ass of life than we do, so let's learn a lesson. And the zebra looks at man and thinks, do you realize that men can play dumb? They appear to be dumb, and they will appear to be, to the other man, more intelligent. Why not learn a lesson? What kind of lesson, if we were not talking about the mind, would you learn by appearing to be dumber? You know what the lesson would be, don't you? Assuming you had time to think about it, would be, oh my God, here I go. You'd be dead, was the point. If a zebra decided, I'll learn a lesson. I mean, I've seen men staying around now. I've been observing, watching on TV at least. If you know, maybe not that many zebras get invited to fancy cocktail parties to actually in person observe it. But let's say the zebra's been watching TV and realizes that men kind of play dumb and appear to be more intelligent. They're taken to be more intelligent. And the zebra decides, hey, I'll try it. He would try it once. That if we're not talking about the mind, then that whole news item is pre-route bamboozle. It's meaningless. It would be deadly if they could do it. Man has always realized, back to where we were, that the intellect is synonymous with chaos. That is, unpredictability. Then you could look, what I was wanting to point out, as things that from an intellectual view now, and even contemporaneously 3,000 years ago, but especially now, you can look back and laugh at much of the rituals, much of the myths. Almost all of religion from a certain view is just, oh, come on. But think what it was. It was a direct attempt to strike some kind of hot mental iron through a kind of fog of chaos, like, well, something is stable. There is something that's predictable. And what does it come up with? It's kind of a two-edged, or two-pronged, it's not two-edged. It's a prong and a half. One is the predictability is almost beyond human grasp. It's why we must have the gods and must have a Vedimekam, must have some holy text somewhere going, all right, you see right here it says, as you reap, so you dumb mothers shall you sow. And for whatever reason, let's say that, you know, you buy into that. You're brought up in that. Make it easy. It does seem to be non-chaotic. Now you could say later, well, I don't approve of it. Hey, God said it. What the hell do we care whether you approve of it? Well, I guess you got me. I don't like it. But it seems to be what? The anathema of chaos. That's the half prong. Then the real prong, I say there's a prong and a half, the real prong, because that you could, ordinary minds can wrestle with, which they've done, and not just mentally. They have wrestled out on battlefields. I mean, talk to some of the crusaders if you can find any. Talk to Cardinal Fangs, there's 12 friends, especially his enemies. In other words, what people actually have gotten into physical warfare apparently over such matters. But the first prong, the prong, not a half a prong, the prong is, yes, there is something in the midst of chaos. There is something damn predictable. Not the half prong about arguing over what God said. You know, because somebody said, well, some other God on another country down the road said something else going to them. Yeah. Regardless of all that, beyond all of the apparently sectarian denominational splits in religions, there seems to be one predictability. Now I'm going to have to call it what it is, but then right quick, I'll point out that there is a euphemism. See, the predictability is death. But the human mind, that's got no validity except amongst us. That's just not true. Because amongst ordinary people, it's what? Just beyond that. I almost got it. I just didn't go far enough. It's the life after death. That's all right. Calm down. I knew it would take your breath away. That is what it is. It's obvious as soon as I said it that I didn't say it right, did I? That is, all right, the predictability will then be an unavoidable, undebatable, extant reality. What else is paradise? Of all sorts. What do you call it? Paradise, heaven, come back as a higher creature. The whole idea, see, they just take it past the point of the one predictability. The one thing that's not chaotic is death. You cannot walk out to a cemetery if you're sane and think, come on, now straighten out. I mean, this is getting out of hand. If there's one place that there's nothing get out of hand, if there's one place that you don't have to go and feel like, wait a minute, I could be literally, if not figuratively, assaulted from a sundry of directions. You're not going to be assaulted anywhere. They're dead. But the predictability is not there, because if that was it, then you'd have sort of the terminal. It has to be right past that. It is very, I guess I got too convoluted with all of it. The human mind has continually, long before science circa 1993, the mind has had an awareness that everything was chaotic here. It then translates it out to there, and it does appear to be so. And they can say, scientists could be standing here and say, well, you're getting way off the subject, because the universe, in certain respects, is chaotic. And we're becoming smart enough. Our instruments, our technology is becoming, now listen to him, I'm doing it for him, this is becoming precise enough that we understand more. For the good old days of a Newton, when the laws of physics, when the laws of the universe seem to be rather stable and predictable. Yeah, for simpler times, because now we have ways to measure and to make the universe talk. I told you, we're not talking about that kind of chaos and Maxwell Smart. We don't have ways to make the universe talk. That was a small. Torture it. They do, with instruments. The scientists would say, we now know that things are not as simple, as straightforward, as predictable as they once seemed. We can now measure more precisely. We can see further. We can take more of the activities of the electromagnetic spectrum into account. We now know that this is not a safe, dull, bland, almost dead universe like it is if you go out in your backyard and get up on a stepladder and try to look up real high in the sky. Maybe you're on your brother's shoulders. They hold me up high so I can see better. And you look out, and it just seems to be real quiet out there. Maybe you see one or two little stars blink, but it's mostly you listen. It's just nothing. Right? Real nice and calm. Yeah, but that's just a human eye. They got instruments now that show that out there, it's an ungodly, continual process of chaos. Right? We have already been through, if any of you recall, the idea of technology and etc. So what's happened? It's nothing new. The human mind's always known that, because the human mind understands, the intellect understands that it's an incompleted process. Well, it has to live with the fact that it is. And therefore, what can you call how can you fit in the idea of the mind's own concept of itself as being anything other than, it might not want to use this word, or it might not have immediately leaped to its lips, but what can you call it that would be better than chaotic? What's psychiatry for, if religion sounds too far in the past? It's trying to bring some order to one's life. And people would ordinarily, they'd want to say, well, no, that's not some sort of across-the-board rule. It's only people who have had certain problems, and they need their life straightened out. They need some kind of fresh view of what's occurred to them. Anybody sane needs help. You know that. Out in life, anybody who's sane is partially crazy. Or conversely, ask somebody, are you sane? If they say, absolutely, 100%. We all know that person's a nut. The man's probably dangerous, somebody tell you that. Which is, in case you missed it before, that's a variation that the zebra was pointing out. You appear to be more intelligent by appearing to be less intelligent. I thought I'd trick you. But see, one time, most of you had that. Did I ruin it by putting the words in the mouth of a zebra? Was that it? Is there some sort of... Well, it is based on the same thing. You do understand it's not just a joke. You don't have to worry about zebras. People must say, ordinary sane people, or if you like it the hard way, they cannot say that they are absolutely 100% sane, that there is nothing about them that resembles any form of neurosis, no sort of subconscious motivations are driving them. If somebody told you that and you're just an ordinary sane person, you would begin to, that's right, yeah, oh yeah, well, I could always tell that you're an exceptional person, and try to find the door, because you just immediately know the man is, that is the same thing conversely now. Of saying, well, it's nice for you to say how sane I am to somebody. You say, but, if you knew, it's an effort to be civilized. It's an effort to act normal. And if it was you saying that to another civilized, ordinary person, they would nod along. Yeah, you're right. We're all a little nuts probably in private, or at least in the privacy of our head. So that, by admitting you're a little crazy, does what? Makes you look more sane. The human mind has been fighting this, I guess that might be one of their words, for as long as it's been thinking, as witnessed by religion, as witnessed by psychology, by psychiatry, as witnessed by ordinary conversation of people admitting to one another that they have personal problems. But you got to, you need to remember, if you're going to get away from it, what personal problems are when people say it. When they're saying it, they're not saying, I got a stomach ache. You know that. If they got a stomach ache, they'll say, I got a stomach ache. Who cares nowadays? Take a take a minute. Take a minute. We're civilized people here. We're having a party. And the most you got to, add to the conversation is, you got a stomach ache? Hell, I'm having flashbacks to when my mother died and I was on LSD and couldn't find the funeral home. And you got a stomach ache? That ain't going to do nowadays. Well, it never did do, but I just wanted to use an extreme comparison to try and bring us up to date. Personal problems are not physical problems anymore, unless you were living in a very down there savage condition, and savage locale. And that is, you've got less of your life being run by the intellect, and then your personal problems would be, hey, I'm starving to death. That's about it. But you're all civilized and well-fed. You're not savages. And so personal problems amount to one thing, and they are not physical. Never, never, never. That's no longer it. You could be sick, but that is not a personal problem. A personal problem now, it's got to fit the same sort of definition, is pretending to be, acting as though you're dumber to appear more intelligent, acting as though you may be crazier, admitting that you're partially crazy, so as to certify your sanity. You must have personal problems to be a person. You must have personal problems of some kind to be an intellectual, civilized person. Perforce, they're all up here. And I don't mean your imagination. I was going to tell him, of course, I don't mean it's not, but that doesn't prove much. It's that the problems are personal. That the chaos of the world is not sickness. The chaos of the world is not the decay of the human body. The chaos is that the human mind, suddenly there it is. It's Adam and Eve. It is a singular creature that does not know why, but can look around, and as soon as the human mind can think, it's aware that I am not that thing with stripes and 4 legs. And I'm not that little hairy thing with an ugly tail with fleas all over it and foaming at the mouth. That I am something else. And in a sense, it realizes I am superior. Just to use a word, just make it easy. I am superior to these creatures. But what does the superiority amount to once you have established that? That's where the trick is. Because after that, any civilized person can begin to wax and wane on forever about, well, here's how we're superior. We can write fiction. We can paint. We can conceive of the gods. We can lay on our backs and look up at the clouds and think, that looks like Pee Wee Herman in a profile. And zebras can't do that. No other creature can. But what is all of that? All of that is saying one thing. It is saying that, and I know people do not put it in these words, never have, but the mind is saying we should be able to nail down reality. Translated, we should be able to predict what's going to happen. The relationship between the mind and life, the relationship between, if we can go back for a couple of days, you remember about if you let the relationship between you and somebody become part of the relationship, which is always there, but if you allow it, then you're dancing with somebody, a lover, a friend, a philosophy, a religion, but there's a third party always dancing with you. Always. No matter what happens, there's a third party and you don't recognize it. We're back to the same position, believe it or not. And many people in the front row went, Jesus, I didn't know, I couldn't understand when we were there the first time. I just analyzed the news, sir. What if you're back to the relationship of the mind, without it using these kind of words, the mind just knows, and it's correct in this. That's where the mind is moving, it's where it always has been. That end of the nervous system in man, it is moving toward greater and greater realms of predictability, which is what one of the news items tonight was, that some scientists now like to say from chaos comes order. And the news item said a more detailed telling of this, another version would be to say from chaos comes man, and through man comes an expansion of stability. An expansion, a gradual, a non-ending expansion of what seems to be order. But here's where if you're interested in thinking off on your own, where the trick is, the relationship between man and chaos, between man's mind and its operational drive, its operational unstated awareness that its purpose is to impose some kind of order. It's dancing, it's mind. Let's make the dance right now. Man's mind and chaos. Man's mind and the world just being kind of an unpredictable place. Forget physically. It's applied to your body. You're going to die. And we've got that. That's the end of your chaos. But as far as the rest of it, man looks out and he thinks, I should be able to predict the weather. Get around to controlling it shortly. But I should be able to predict it. I should be able to predict what other people will say when I say so and so. And the mind knows it can't, but the mind knows that's what I keep doing. I keep wanting to do it, so that's got to be what we're up to. There's a third party dancing, because that dance, just on those two partners, is not coming to an immediate, that is in your lifetime, of fruition at an ordinary level. No man dies if he's still sane, and you say, well, you lived 70 years, and you were in college 60 of those years. You read every book. Do you now know what life's about, what it was all about? And if he's still sane, he goes, well, certainly not, and dies. So it's not going to happen. So what does happen, what I was going to get to, this third party, you look off and you get distracted, in a sense, by the other third part, by the unspoken party, the unspecified party, so it's become science. Instead of understanding more, we got better instruments. Oh, come on. Computers even. That's a crude one, but they're all kinds. The satellites now to measure X-rays, telescopes getting larger and larger, putting them out in orbit to get away from the diffraction of light here on the planet and the atmosphere. The technology is getting so good. I mean, it's fun to read. We're not attacking it. And if you don't analyze it in some cold-blooded way in which we are off the dance floor, then you would have to sanely, reasonably admit that we are making progress that is just absolutely mind-boggling. Well, it's better than using a cliche. Make you do it yourself. In case you want to have a train transplant. All right. If you will, those really trying, if you'll listen real quick. It's not an attack on technology, as you know it's not an attack on anything. But you understand now technology, just in the widest sense, technology is now religion, in a sense. Technology is now God. And I don't mean it metaphorically. Screw that. I'm telling you the truth, what it's become. Because now the technology, the brain, the mind at the ordinary level, as it should, would defend and laugh at you if you said otherwise, that the increase in our technology has increased our wisdom, our understanding, and our ability to predict. We are less victim of chaos, just in the natural world, than we were. For instance, we have the ability now, through the technology that sprang from the mind, it went through man, remember? They got us. That we now have satellites doing nothing but tracking weather, plus we have enough computer programs that we can put together information. We're not exact. I mean, we're not absolute, but we can damn sure now say, all right, we can see it. We can track it. There is a hurricane, such and such degrees latitude and longitude, so many miles southeast of Everglades City, Florida. The rate it's going, it will hit so and so. And so you have to say, that is progress. We can now predict better. And if we left it there, it's just, well, by God, 3 cheers for progress, and the man talked himself out of what apparently he started out talking about, right? Don't you wish? I always wanted to just stop some night after I brought it right up to the point that, you know, it would sound as though, if you're listening one way, that I have absolutely refuted everything I said. I guess I'm just not cut out to be a mad dog killer, am I? Or a priest, or an attorney, or an accountant, a bureaucrat. Well, it would sound as though that by and large what I've been talking about has just been handily, if I may say so, refuted by yours truly. Do you understand? And we're not, by any means, knocking technology. We're not saying, you know, if you had a house down there in that area of Florida and there was any chance you could save it, or if you could save yourself and your family, oh, you would thank the Weather Service and be glad that you paid taxes, and et cetera, et cetera. But is that an increase in man's understanding of life? The answer is no. Is it that much of a increase in the predictability? Now, in the real sense, I'm not saying that they can't say, well, it's coming. But if there was something that was absolute, which is what the mind's always had and has been the unspoken part of the drive to predict, is what I threw in a little earlier, and I bypassed it, is also the desire, it's right behind it, it's the next step over, to control. Because the mind will tell you, the more intelligent, the more civilized, the more learned a man is in any field, from mathematics to science to weather forecasting. That is part of science, that is part of technology, is to say, all right, is there any chance we're ever going to be able to control such and such? Flooding here in this area. Any chance that we can, because flooding, of course, caused by the weather, and the mind says, all right, if we had any more, if we had just some more information, if we could predict more, even if they don't want to say it under the conditions, because they might think, I'm about to put my foot in it if they were real sharp. But what they're always saying is, a little more information, and we can control it. Back to religion. What is it? If you got on enough good graces, if you got in close enough with God, who's already here in your holy book, whichever one it was, that said, all right, Those that plant corn, by God's going to eat corn. Oh. Well, at least there's one thing for sure. If I got in closer with God, I'd be part of that kind of stability, that kind of predictability. I would not be subject to the vicissitudes of life. So it's always, whether the mind wants to say it at the time or not, right past the point. If we had just a little more info, a little more data, that we could put together programs that would predict just a little more precisely what's next after that. Even if they don't want to say it, you got to say it. What's next after that? It just comes natural. Control. According to all the charts, according to what our satellites show us, this hurricane will be hitting Miami in the next couple of hours. How close are we to doing anything about that hurricane? Can you spell, boys and girls? Never. Can you spell? No. Maybe you could. They can always, by the way, if you really want to play with technology and how the mind has got to run, they could take an atomic device and go down there and blow that hurricane away, right? Except you'd have, maybe we point out, certain aftermath, certain side effects of destroying the hurricane, right? Technology. Having better instruments, where I was trying to get to, and this now has to become really symbolic, beyond metaphorical, beyond literal. Technology passes, nothing wrong with it, but it passes unanalyzed for intellectual progress. If we were real cheap, just between you and me, we'd say, all right, it is an excuse. Men are so dumb, they go out and get a big old education, they spend a whole bunch of years in school, and they say, well, I'm now an expert in this, and maybe they can develop a microscope that's now 1 times more, 1 degree, 1% more specific, more detail than the last one. And you say, now we're getting somewhere. Of course, now they've got those electron microscopes that supposedly actually will give you a programmed or a computerized version of seeing atoms. Is that amazing? And it is. I mean, it's interesting. If you hadn't seen those little things that they do with that little, whatever they call it, you go, my God, is that really what a molecule, an atom, looks like? Well, I'll just be damned. Just look at that. All right, now, beyond that, what has that done for your brain, for your understanding? What's that done for the man's brain who did do it? Now, he may win some kind of award, but you have got to be to the point now, or past the point of thinking, well, the man who did that has got to be exceptional. Of course, you can think that, but you got to remember this. The world is full of, forget scientists, you're way outnumbered. The world is full of people that would jump off of a moving train to touch a movie star. Or a guy can throw a ball through a net. That's where the real heroes are. We're down to a fairly refined area of little heroes. But if you think that they're any greater, now I was trying to use that to make some of you kind of chuckle and think, hey, that is kind of silly. People that go out and spend all their money, stay up all night to get a ticket to go see Ozzy Osbourne. Boy, he was washed up anyway. Now, if we're talking about somebody, humor doesn't go over good in the final minutes, does it? You could laugh at somebody else's hero, especially when it seemed to be part of the, outside the realm of the world of academia, the higher intellectual and artistic classes such as I'm sure all of you are a part of. And you can laugh at those that would go see a movie star or get trampled to touch some rock singer. You say, well, I might dress up and take a bath if I could get invited to the post-Nobel Prize awards dinner. That's a suitable hero, or go where they hang out Pulitzer Prizes or the technology, the ability to measure the chaos of life is no individual movement, no progress individually of any man's understanding, including the person who developed the technology. But notice at the ordinary level, as it must, what if we pointed out, what if it was defensible in a certain way? What if it was damn near provable to say. There was a news item a few nights ago that strongly hinted. What if it was defensible to say that without any doubt, technology, science, but just let's say technology, the external world of man, continues our tempo, if not our pace, to move forward, that we're dressed better, we have better medicine, we have better foods than we did 3,000 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, that kind of progress, without any doubt, seems to increase exponentially, just moving on, just without any doubt. And yet if you could look without having any heartburn, without having any prunes in your pocket, without being upset, that if you could peer into the soul, as they like to say of man, the insides of man, his intelligence, his understanding over the last 3,000 years, is a man staying here now, taller, better health, better dressed, more sophisticated, his nails done, and you see right next to him a painting from a wall. Well, that's too far. A painting from even the early Middle Ages of how people looked in Germany. They got rags on their feet. And this is the mayor of the city. And their nose is about this big, and they got a look in their eyes that like somebody just got through and give them a nice rap with a ball-peen hammer. And and it's got the guy's name, the Duke so-and-so. He was the king's right-hand man. He was the richest guy in that area. And you look at him, go back and look at some of those paintings. I mean, the guy paid somebody, and he's all dressed up. And you think, Jesus, boy, I'd hate to be trapped on an elevator with that guy. And he was considered the creme de la creme of society. You follow? And you could say, wait a minute. Look at me compared to this guy's picture, his painting. Look at all of life. There's no doubt the progress we have made externally. Without any doubt. Only a fool would say life's going downhill. An idiot, a critic, a left-handed batter would get up and say, well, life is going downhill. Now, if we're talking about out here, you're an idiot. You've got to be nuts. Well, you can be ordinary, but you're still nuts. But what if you now, without any prune face, no cynicism, not getting the blues, you could suddenly look, what I'm about to point at, some of you already know, internally, are you sure that man is that much different 3,000 years from now? Take that whole span. Are you sure there's enough recorded history? People were playing psychologists and reflecting and ruminating. Back then, the Greeks were, if you want to take the Western world, about what they were doing. Read some of that, if you must. And then just think, boy, 2,500 years ago, what progress we made, and read what some of these guys were writing, and then if you can look off and just, if you could, what do they call it, be honest for a second, and think, well, shit, that's the same kind of crap I think about. Are you sure that things have changed that much internally? But you couldn't stop there. I'm playing with you guys and saying, well, don't do it in any sense of feeling that it's a negative observation or a negative comment. But if ordinary people were faced with that, and it was defensible, it could be proven. It would get dangerously close to being proven. It would be quite disruptive, quite heartbreaking, disappointing to people. But one of the reasons for technology, you could say, is that you don't have to look at it. It just almost never crosses your mind, because technology keeps improving. We can see further and further out in the universe. Does that mean you understand more about it? Shut up. We can now see smaller and smaller particles. So you mean you're about to now narrow down life? Get out of here. Do you follow? Science is just the easy one. Or of course, for some of you, the way it's going tonight, it may be not the easy one. But it's the same. At least we don't believe, like the Greeks did, that gods actually live just outside of town up on top of a mountain, and they get drunk and will come in and try to seduce your wife while you're out at work. You know, how ridiculous, if not obscene. So at least we made progress. Well, hell, even 100 years ago, we were killing people because they were witches and believing that crap. At least we're making more progress. It's the same thing. We have better microscopes. We no longer, find me a church in the Western world, in the civilized world, find me any reasonable church, not some kind of cult, but an institutional mainstream church that now believes that people are witches and should be killed. Find me one, and you can't. And so you got to say, well, Forget 2,500 years ago. Look at the progress we have made just in the last 200 years. And you can't deny it. But it's the same thing as saying, do you realize how much better, I was hardly in comparison, between microscopes now and what they were trying to deal with 200 years ago, if you even want to call it one? Do you realize that? And you go, my God. But it will not withstand a cold-blooded view of looking at the chaos, the original chaos that is the human mind. The human intellect at the ordinary level, if it is alive, it is chaotic. That is, it's unpredictable. That is one of, back to another slight step, it's one of the purposes of people having names. A wider purpose is what seems to be one's personality. Not that you actually sit down and decide, well, I'm going to do this, but operationally, I've used the description before, and some of you follow what I'm saying. Operationally, the way life does it, it's almost as though you have been turned into a Ken or Barbie doll, that there was just an opening here, and you got injected, and it went, the plastic went boom and filled you out. And it said, all right, you're Ken and you're Barbie, and you went, okay. And you answer the name, and it's like you become localized in your thinking enough that there seems to be perhaps 60 years of acceptable predictability. That you more or less, if you're civilized, which is part of what being civilized is that you are fairly predictable. Because if you're not, you are nuts. You're not mainstream. So amidst all the chaos, not out there, amidst all the chaos, there seems to be a little amount of sanity. There seems to be a small island of pseudo-sanity, faux sanity. Oh, well, hoped for sanity. That even though plenty of sane people, plenty of priests and rabbis and prime ministers get up in the morning and sometimes think, my God, I've lost it. I cannot go back down that damn courthouse or that temple or that church and put on that funny robe or those costumes or my suit and look at somebody and say, sir, how dare you operate in this manner? Or people, do you want to know what life's all about? I can't do it again. I'm going to go absolutely bonkers. And then it's like, well, no. I'm Ken. And maybe you hear the voice in the kitchen holler, Ken, are you about ready to eat? And it's like, well, you snap to it. Or you look in the mirror and you go, wait a minute, I can't fall apart. I'm Princess Barbie. I'm Rabbi Barbie. Yes, that's who I am. Now I'm all right. I'm Judge Barbie. Okay, all right. That is part. Well, think about it another way. We're not actually into analyzation of psychology, but again, here's how life deals with it. It's just quite obvious, unless I went this far, what better description you want all across the board of what is less than being intellectually stable. What's the first thing that people describe when they begin to feel like they're coming apart, whether they actually become psychotic or certifiable put-me-away time? But it's always, and I'm sure plenty of you have had the feeling before, either fooling with drugs or you take your own excuse or you got a weak brain somewhere. But when you feel like you're about to lose it, what is it? It's like you almost don't know who you are. And people, when that begins to happen, people that not necessarily have gone over the edge, as they call it, they've lost it, they will turn to their friends or they'll call somebody and they'll go, look at me, am I okay? Am I still me? I feel like that it's like something, my mind, nowadays that's the term, I'm losing my mind. But what are they actually saying? What they're saying is the natural chaos of the nervous system is about to overtake me. That's not what they say by any means. But what they're saying is the operational island of sanity that seemed to be me seems to be eroding. My personality is becoming Savannah Beach. And I do not have the Corps of Engineers here to shore me back up. I seem to be drifting. That is the difference, again, of other items. I wouldn't go in necessarily, but trying to describe the difference between the local and the universal. For the local is to be sane. For the local is to be captive. Back to sane, you like that? To be a cow. To be sane. To be simple. To be sane. To be bland. To be sane. To be boring. To be sane. Jesus. To be anti-change. To be sane. To have no great interest in variety. To be sane. You ever try? It's interesting to do a debate with yourself. Let me leave it. There's a lot that you might consider yourself, because it's part of life. It's everyday life of civilization in the city, all the way from religion to psychology to art, and then down to the ultimate instrument. It is the attempt of life to bring, to use their terminology, to bring some order from chaos. But forget the scientific view, the ordinary view. It should be a more revealing, is to say that it's life attempting to bring, or it brings man out of chaos, not man physically, but up here, which is the only thing that makes man man, brings that out of chaos and then puts it in charge. It becomes the local Amway salesman, the Amway representative for life. And it sends each man's intellect out amongst his fellow man and out amongst his own neurons, knocking on doors, saying, would you like to be sane? Would you like to feel that there's some kind of stability in the midst of all this? Would you like to be able to predict what's going to happen? And all sane minds, everybody in your neighborhood answers the door, and they go, yes. Of course, that's the end of it. You go, yes? It's like the sign on a church or on a psychiatrist's office or on an art museum says, would you like to know what life's about? And you go, yes, and you go in. And you go, hello? 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 And you hear an echo. Hello? Of course, technology will take care of that finally, see, because then they'll get better baffling to where you can go into an art museum or a church and the sign said, you want to know the secret of life or the meaning? You go in and go, yes! And technology can improve to the point that they can get up kinds of baffling or change the slope of the walls to where you don't hear that unsightly echo as bad. Did you follow that? In other words, the answer, the nothingness, seems to be making some progress. We can see further into the universe. It's easier to predict those inconvenient hurricanes. And that concludes the analyzation of the news. Well, wait a minute. Quick. Query. Are a whole bunch of men all together smarter than just one man by himself? Query. Are a whole bunch of men all together dumber than just one man all alone? I want you to understand that the answer is yes, yes. I felt like I shouldn't have left that hanging. Social News Princess Paradox married Captain Irony, and they had a little explosion. Note, this can be explained. You can understand, but it can be explained by the fact that the square root of 2 will not go into Atlantis. That is, just picked them out, two great imaginaries. No, square root of 2 does not exist. Atlantis doesn't exist, right? But wait a minute. The news item said, Captain Paradox married Princess Irony. Irony exists. Paradox exists. Hey, who wrote the news item? See that kind of literary balance. Princess Paradox and Captain Irony, you would have to equate with the bottom note of the square root of 2 and Atlantis. All four have equal validity. I knew you'd be glad that I at least went on to one or two more. Can I see 45? Who's got 45? got it?
Coming.
The numbers are off. It's not it either. Yep, that was it. Already did it. Well, I don't think anybody particularly got it. Two items on the page. The local is smaller than the universal, but larger than you, which is exactly what we've been talking about, and which is one reason that technology, part it plays is to cover this up. As it's supposed to. I'm just being crude, cover it up. It's to distract you. As long as technology moves, you do not see the validity of this. The second part was, the boogie ain't the boogie if it ain't the mindless boogie. All right, the other one was, I don't have it, but said that as men began, or as they began to abandon the dangerous, decaying, erstwhile Garden of Paradise, and to come into the safety of the new urban area, the area said, welcome. Guts, hormones, your zebra and rat lives, but it said guts were made to have fun. The mind to be disturbed. Now come on in, you're home. See, that's it. And those of you who laughed and didn't know why you laughed, then back to somewhere else outside the urban area. It can't be back. Ordinary mind say, well, you mean you got to go back to the savage state. Gag me with a dichotomy. No, but why you laughed back to the news item was, the boogie ain't the boogie if it ain't the mindless boogie. And of course, once you're civilized, the boogie is never completely the mindless boogie. If it was, for instance, when you were fucking, you'd cut your mind off. Just, I don't mean that necessarily literally, and maybe I do. Or when you're eating, you could cut off your mind. Maybe that'd be easier. I'm sure, maybe, haha, I'm sure it will. You're eating, you're starving. I mean, you're really hungry, and there it is, chocolate ice cream, and while you're eating it, all you see is in your mind pictures of ever-expanding cellulite. You see your buttocks and your thighs getting fatter and fatter. You understand? And your guts are trying to boogie. And your mind is going, come on. Now, the boogie ain't the boogie unless it's the mindless boogie. And civilized people can't really back up without severe tire damage. And so I guess if you're an ordinary person, to play that game, you could say, well, how do you get out? And if you're an ordinary person, don't sweat it. You can't. That's a good thing about not having to talk directly to ordinary people, because then you don't ever have to explain this, see? You can just leave it. But if it's an ordinary person, and I was making some kind of living, I was some kind of lecturer and doing all this, and you got to the end of people, paying money and buying courses, I'd be lynched. Because they go, all right, you got me. I mean, you have pushed us around for the last, if I really got there and carried on for hours or something, but by God, you have pushed my brain back and forth and my stomach and my sex organs. What? This has been one trip, and you made me realize things are just, they're just not exactly like I thought, but I see basically where you're pointing, so what can I do? And I say, nothing. I mean, can't you just see them all getting on their feet and give me a rounding of, standing applause? To maybe distract me while somebody goes for a rope. Which is another way of looking, if you must, is why this never has any validity, no currency, no value in the ordinary world. I mean, in case you keep forgetting everything, well, all we got to do is just change it a little bit. Maybe if he'd wear a suit and tie or let some of us help him out, maybe, get on network TV or something. Right. Just always, people listen and go, in case you never noticed, we still have people show up, and the way things are going, people can sit and listen for a while. They'll never make it to the end, even if they sit here physically. They'll listen for a while, and the mind knows. I don't mean that they're dumb, but their nervous system knows that this is not coming to a satisfying fruition. Contrary, it gets them, in a sense, they'll start off sometimes and go, hey, and you'll see them nod, and that only lasts, let's say they sit here for just, let's say an hour. Like the first 15 minutes, hey, and then like the next 15, they kind of get stiff. And it's like they almost start becoming reflective, that they actually start thinking about it. And then it's like the next 15, we're into the 45-minute period now, is their nervous system suddenly strikes them that those first two segments of the game, the first two quarters, you put them all together and they ain't going to spell mother. They're not going to spell satisfaction. The third quarter, the third 15 minutes almost, it's like they realize, I'm getting out of here. And they don't know why. It's just, this is not going anywhere that I like. And of course, what they mean is, without knowing it, it's not going anywhere that makes any sense. You cannot take the way you ordinarily think, anybody, and take this sort of thing, if you hear a piece of it, and take it and put it in your head. Which is part of the running jokes, part of me having guys say stuff about, watch out for people on missions, or strong commitments, or a man with a philosophy to live by ain't living. And you assume, if you're an ordinary person, well, that's allegorical. That's not allegorical. You're partisan. You're stuck at the ordinary level. I don't care what the philosophy is. It's not a good philosophy or a bad philosophy, or a right religion, right words to live by, right motto or wrong motto. It's any. In the third 15 minutes of trying to listen to this, a person starts, like at least the first two, somewhere in there, their mottos, their philosophies of life, they were really trying to give this some sort of listen. Maybe they were overheated. And it's almost like for the first 30 minutes, worms get into their philosophy. I'd prefer another way. A breath of fresh air comes into their stale closet. But after about 30 minutes, they realize, I still ain't getting out of the closet. All this is going to do is drive me nuts. And of course, it takes a split second for that to happen, and they decide they can look at me or whoever's doing it and think, well, fuck this shit. These people are nuts. That's when you know they're gone. They can still be sitting there, but I can turn around just out of a corner of one eye. And for 30 minutes, people go, ha. And I don't even have to look, and I can look, and suddenly... And of course, at least we leave it laughing at strangers. How many times you listen? Why do I keep saying things about, well, did I lose everybody? We're not playing the sermons. And I'm not playing humble, going, oh, well, I shouldn't have said. Even you listen, your brain just finally goes, well, the boogie ain't the boogie. I still think that should be a new church. The boogie ain't the boogie unless it's the mindless boogie. And once you've got a mind, you can't really back up at that level and ever get back to the mindless boogie. Which is what drugs are, alcohol, mysticism, the belief that things are going downhill, the love of the past. It's all that people are trying to be a savage again, in a sense. And they know they can't. And even if they could, they can't. Yes, I will be a savage. Well, you won't be for long. You'll be a savage for 5 or 10 minutes until they catch you. Of course, if you're real civilized to start with, they don't even have to catch you. You catch yourself. You're a savage for 5 minutes or so, and you go, oh, God, I'm going to feel terrible about this later. They don't even have to catch you.